Number 62 is Mirror Mirror, starting off a concept that is utilized again and again in Star Trek and even has an entire series of novels. Captain Kirk and his landing party are involved in a transporter accident that sends them to a parallel universe where the Federation is replaced by a militaristic empire, and their counterpart appear on our Enterprise. And it is a fascinating concept that I think is played out so well in this first attempt. I actually think this is the second best, if not best, Mirror Mirror implementation of that universe, even though it's used many times again. It's a great classic episode. Spock is a great standout as well. That is such a famous image of Spock with the goatee. And it's fantastic to see these two parallel universes play out and see all the similarities and the differences and all the nuances of how things work in the politics of the ship in this mirror universe. And it builds one of my favorite Star Trek concepts. Number 61 is my second favorite episode of the original series from Season 2. We have The Trouble with Tribbles, where the Enterprise must deal with tensions with a Klingon and a space station that is being overrun by Tribbles. It's one of those episodes that just radiates pure entertainment. It is joyful to watch, it is fun, but it's not pure silliness and fluff. It's not like an episode like Shore Leave, which is just kind of ridiculous. All the humor and fun elements work and they don't feel out of place or silly. They still work within an interesting plot, and the extra tension with having the Klingons on board the station as well adds a new layer. So it's a great classic episode that I'm sure anyone watching us has seen many, many times. And for me, it is still an old standard. It is still a favorite to this day, and it's probably the episode of the original series that I've watched the most number of times, because it's one that can very frequently end up in the rotation, and I still love it every time because it has everything that I like about that original crew. Number 60 from the second season of the original series, we have my favorite episode of the entire original series, the Doomsday Machine. The Enterprise encounters the derelict USS Constellation and Commodore Decker, and the entire episode revolves around attempting to stop this giant planet killer, this ancient doomsday machine, which seems totally unstoppable, and the mental anxiety and collapse of Commodore Decker, and the guilt that he feels, and just, it is, to me, the most tense and emotionally powerful episode of that entire original series. I watched this for the first time many, many, many years ago, and it just left me floored. From the first time I watched, I'm like, wow, that was the first episode of the original series that I saw that really hit me just as hard as ongoing Star Trek at the time, like new episodes of TNG. That was one of the first reruns that I saw that I'm like, wow, the original series is awesome. And to this day, it has always remained my favorite in that entire series. It's just such a fantastic concept, and it's pulled off so well. And I can just hear the music just talking about this episode. I can hear the music and the tension, and feeling that tenseness in my chest, like watching it, and just fantastic. It's such a wonderful, powerful experience that I think it is truly a brilliant episode and my favorite in the entire original series. Number 59 is another two-parter from the end of Star Trek Voyager's Season 5 and the beginning of Season 6. We have Equinox. Voyager encounters another stranded Federation vessel, the Equinox. But they're in an entirely different situation. Their vessel is much smaller and not as well equipped for this type of long voyage. Voyager itself wasn't really built for that, but is better equipped than the Equinox by far. And while Voyager had decided very early on immediately to maintain Federation decorum and regulations, the Equinox decided to be far more lax and to survive, just kind of leave those behind, and everyone be a little more equal. And we see the differences in those two styles, and as their journey went on, how that affected the crew. And then Voyager also uncovers that the Equinox is under attack, it seems, by a hostile alien species, but it turns out they were actually the ones who began the hostility, and they are using an alien species to try and power their ship to get home faster. And we have a great moral dilemma, and what's fascinating about it is that it's not a true, oh, they've just kind of gone evil. It's not an evil captain. You really, throughout the course of these two episodes, empathize with their situation and really think about what is truly a gray morality, and what would they have done in that same situation. What separates how Voyager is from the Equinox, and a lot of great, interesting questions and getting into the mindset of the crew of the Equinox, and fascinating to the point where, like, I really would have enjoyed maybe in the books having this episode has a novelization, but having maybe a few novels about the journey of the Equinox and getting to know that crew, because you know them so well just in this 2-episode span, to get a cool idea of their journey. It'd be cool to see it a little more fleshed out. Just in wanting that shows how well these 2 episodes are written, that I'd want to explore more. So it's definitely a really cool 2-parter that gets to the heart of what makes Starfleet Starfleet. Number 58 is my favorite premiere of a Star Trek series. It has been since it first came on, and it completely blew away all my expectations, and I was in for an amazing ride. We have the premiere of Deep Space Nine, Emissary. To me, this premiere does such an incredible job of setting up every element of what the series is going to be. It's one of the hardest things about setting up a brand new show, is not only do you have to have a contained story that works in its own right, but you also have to present the characters, get enough of an understanding of who they are to make people want to come back, explain the world they're in, what is going on. And Deep Space Nine also had to incorporate what makes this different from the original series and the Next Generation. It's not just another lesser TNG on the air. It's something very, very different, and can be on at the same time as TNG and not take from it, but just add to it by adding more depth to the universe in which it takes place. And it sets that up so beautifully, and there's not a moment in it that feels like forced, unnecessary exposition. It all feels like it makes, as I explain things, it makes sense within the context of the story of the premiere, what's actually happening, the exploration of the wormhole for the first time, understanding what's going on with the Cardassian occupation and the Bajorans, and implementing the seeds that were planted in the Next Generation in the previous year, and how those build into here, and who is Commander Sisko, and what is his stance, and getting the little bit of his experience in Wolf 359 in that moment with Picard, something that was mirrored very well with the Captain of the Titan in Picard, the series. Like, you have that moment here for the first time with Commander Sisko, and seeing his perspective and how he's been colored by his experience of Wolf 359, and seeing that originally when that came out was very powerful, because Picard was sort of this moral high ground, this hero, and seeing a different perspective, and seeing someone who doesn't see him that way was just fascinating. And it really, I think, was an exceptional way to start a new chapter in the franchise. Number 57 from the 3rd season of Deep Space Nine, we have what I feel is one of the best performances by Nana Visitor as Kira in Second Skin, where Kira finds herself on Cardassia with the appearance of being a Cardassian, and she is being told that she is actually a deep undercover spy. She's really a Cardassian and the daughter of this influential Cardassian, and it's played out so well, where you have moments where you almost question, as Kira, obviously opposed to this ridiculous notion that she could possibly be a sleeper spy, and because of her entire past and how any of that could be a lie, and then she even has moments of questioning, and it's done incredibly well, and you don't feel any intense hatred or villainization of like a Gamora who's supposed to be her her father. You start to feel sympathy for him and his situation, and they form a bond and a relationship that is explored later as well, where it ends up being just such a fascinating character study and a brilliant, moving, dramatic performance by these two. Number 56 is a two-parter from the season 3 of Deep Space Nine, Past Tense. And this one, over time, has become a little freaky because we are nearing the date when it takes place, and it's not entirely unbelievable, the scenario in the world we are in. Sisko, Bashir, and Dax are accidentally sent to the past, the 21st century, in San Francisco during a rather dark period in Earth's history, and they find themselves playing an integral part in a famous historical event, the Bell Riots, as they struggle to not only survive and make their way through this period of time and try and find a way home, but also trying to keep the past intact. And they are forced to play a more integral role in that than they would ever wish to in order to maintain that temporal integrity. It's a very powerful episode, and again, I love looking into the past of this world as much as I like looking towards the future and exploring new things. I love when Star Trek does a good job of showing a bit of the path to getting to that point, to seeing how the past built things up to this era, and is really just a fantastically fun two-parter that is a great social message that resonates even more greatly today than when it first aired. Number 55, Deep Space Nine Season 5 episode, Nor the Battle to the Strong, where Dr. Bashir and Jake Sisko respond to a distress signal where a Federation colony is under attack by the Klingons, and this is a very important episode in the growth of the character of Jake Sisko as it examines the horrors of war in a way that I found to be even more powerful and effective than in the later AR-558, which is very powerful in its own right and made it on this list. But this has a similar theme but very different perspective as Jake tries to help the Doctor in a seemingly hopeless scenario and constantly trying to help the wounded and seeing death and really being faced with those elements in a way that Jake has never quite encountered so personally outside of the moment of his mother's death on Saratoga, and being able to see that in a very different light, and it just really brings home the horrors of war in a way that very few episodes match quite as strongly. Number 54 from Season 5 of Star Trek Next Generation, we have Cause and Effect, the Groundhog's Day episode, where the Enterprise is stuck in a temporal loop and ends up crashing into the USS Bozeman, which is an older Federation vessel which has been caught in the same time loop for a far longer period of time, and you have that very strong opening where you see the destruction of the Enterprise D to start the episode, and like, whoa, wait a minute. And much like the episode Clue, it's a fun mystery to solve to escape this anomaly and the constant tension of seeing the Enterprise D destroyed or on the verge of destruction multiple times in the same episode. So it's a fantastic episode to revisit. Number 53, also from the 5th season of Star Trek Next Generation, is one that probably wouldn't make many other people's lists. We have Ensign Ro, and I love this episode. Not only is it as a standalone, viewing it in its own right, it's a good episode. It's not a particularly amazing episode, just a good episode. A Star Trek TNG just sort of at its best, where every episode is at least good in this time frame. But why it is so high on the list for me is because of the elements that this particular episode introduces. It's a decent episode in its own right, but it brings about the introduction of one of my favorite Next Generation characters, Ensign Ro and is one of the beginnings of elements that become very important within Deep Space Nine with the Bajorans and the things that become favorite elements of Star Trek in general for me in the future find a lot of introductions here in this episode. So it is one that I find myself going back to rather frequently. It's actually one that I just watched on VHS a few weeks ago just for fun, because it's one that has always stuck with me and is a launching point for a lot of favorite things. Number 52 from Season 2 of Deep Space Nine, we have Necessary Evil. When Odo is forced to revisit an old murder investigation from back when the station was under Cardassian control, and is one of the strongest episodes of the first two seasons in how well it shows and builds upon the history of the station and Odo as a character, and how he was able to maintain the position that he has even after the occupation and working directly under the Cardassians. And you see how that relationship worked and how he has grown as an investigator, and it is a very tragic episode, very, very moving as you explore these mysteries and you really feel for the situation. Especially, it's a strong Kira and Odo episode, and it's definitely one of those early episodes that shows the narrative strength that Deep Space Nine would have over its run. Number 51, we have Homefront from the 4th season of Deep Space Nine, where Captain Sisko is brought back to Starfleet headquarters because it seems that Earth itself may be under threat from changeling attack. And the fascination with this episode is the unraveling of the mystery and the cover-up involved, and the fear that the encroaching Dominion invasion has upon the heart of Starfleet, and how really left to their own devices and attempt to prepare Earth and to save everyone, people with the best intentions can take the wrong path, and sometimes the fear of the attack can be just as powerful as an actual attack. And why it resonates so strongly is because Earth itself throughout this era of Star Trek is largely seen as this impenetrable sanctuary. It really is like a paradise at the heart of the Federation, and to see it crippled by fear and to see it under threat at a very on-the-ground levels, and Federation troops on the streets at one point, it really brings home the powerful effect of what has been going on and what is coming for the Federation, and it starts to show some of the cracks in Utopia. The next two somewhat go together. My choice for number 50 is Deep Space Nine's In Purgatory's Shadow from Season 5. And then also from Season 5 for 49 is By Inferno's Light, in which Worf and Garrick are captured and beamed into an internment camp. They're kept within this Dominion prison and forced to fight Jem'Hadar for sport, as they also try to secretly plan their escape. And they also uncover some great surprises as they find that some very important characters and very important people within their lives were actually have been changelings for a while. So they discover a few other prisoners there. Big shock, and it was one. It made me actually go back when they finally came out on DVD and watch those two episodes, and I want to go back and kind of see if there were like little hints throughout the beginning of Season 5. Kind of interesting idea, and it's just a fun, tense drama and prison break, and these two have always been big standouts for Worf, and it also is a good exploration of Garrick's character, and for the first time we really start to see his claustrophobia come into full effect as well. So it's a good growth moment, and it has great surprises throughout both of these episodes. Number 48 is Deep Space Nine's For the Uniform from Season 5, where Captain Sisko obsessively tries to track down Michael Eddington, not just because he turned out to be a traitor to the uniform and a Maquis spy, but because of the personal betrayal that really starts to come to the forefront and overshadow things. It's one where Captain Sisko struggles and at moments fails to not allow his anger and personal pride overcome his better judgment. It's definitely a very strong episode for that internal struggle, which of course then is also part of a violent external struggle. Number 47 from Deep Space Nine's 5th season, we have The Ship, where they encounter a crashed Jem'Hadar fighter, and with the rising confrontation with the Dominion and the lack of any concrete knowledge of the inner workings of any Dominion technology, this is a golden opportunity for the Federation, and this ship is used later on in an episode. But finding the ship and then holding the ship while under constant attack until they can be rescued and actually capture the ship is another story, and it creates a lot of tension, a lot of loss, a lot of trying to determine, do the losses equal the benefit, and a lot of great moments and tension between Captain Sisko and the Vorta, leader of the Jem'Hadar that is attacking them. Very, very strong episode. And number 46 from the 6th season of Deep Space Nine, A Time to Stand, is where they use that captured vessel to try and sneak into Dominion-controlled territory and destroy a Ketracel White facility. A very dangerous mission that even at one point, to try and keep their cover, they have to attempt to escape a Federation vessel without, they can't reveal who they are and destroy their cover, so they have to fire upon a friendly vessel and hopefully escape. And you have the complications of the crew trying to get used to and learn this very, very different technological setup, and just a lot of tension when things start to, of course, go wrong, as they would in such a tense mission. And the episode even ends with them being left without warp drive, stranded far from any friendly space. Number 45 from Deep Space Nine's 4th season, we have The Sword of Kahless. I've always been an absolute fan of Klingon episodes, Klingon culture, Klingon politics, anything Klingons, ever since I was a kid, and I always will be. Klingons are my favorite. And this is just dripping with everything that I like about Klingon stuff. The adventure, the humor, the history and tradition, and some of the best Klingon stuff, of course, involves Worf, as well as within Deep Space Nine, Dax, as her previous host. Curzon had many Klingon friends due to his post, and they then became friends with Jadzia as well, as the Dax symbiote moved on to the next host, and one of her oldest Klingon friends, Kor, arrives on the station with a map that he believes will lead him to the long-lost Sword of Kahless, and Kor and Jadzia and Worf go on this adventure together, and it is a fantastic treasure hunt episode, and a lot of things that go wrong, both in the finding, a lot of action, and then the tension when they actually do find the sword, and the different perspectives on this relic that Worf and Kor both have. They have very different visions of what respecting this historical relic really means, and it causes a lot of personal tension and drama. And one of my favorite moments is when Dax has just had enough of these two and just shoots them both, just stuns them both, and she's just sick of it. There's so many fantastic, great moments, and Worf holding Kor over the ledge, and whether or not the ledge is big enough to hold him, and comes to a great resolution as well. It's one of those that it's a great combination of things that I love about Klingon episodes with some cool kind of Indiana Jones type elements, and it's just a fun, adventurous episode. Number 44 Another Klingon episode, but a very different Klingon episode from Season 4 of TNG. We have Reunion, where we get to see Ambassador Kalar yet again, and her turbulent relationship with Worf. Also, as well as a very important turning point for the Empire, as the leader of the Klingon High Council passes on, and Captain Picard finds himself in the important position of helping to determine who will lead the Klingon Empire. Very difficult position, especially with the ramifications this decision will have on the relationship of the Federation with the Klingons, and of course the betrayal of the Duras family. One of the 112 times the Duras family are a problem. So a fantastic Klingon political drama, and really looking into the politics of some of the greatest powers in the quadrant and delicate balance of this decision. And then you also have the death of Kalar, the murder of Worf's first true love, and this is when Worf then has to start raising Alexander, the son he did not know he had. And this is the beginning of that relationship, and Worf's questionable parenting of Alexander over the many years. But it is just such a brilliant look at another culture and the politics, and as well as having that incredible drama and one of the most depressing and violent deaths of a great Star Trek character, and just seeing that moment of loss. It's such a powerful moment. And I have to kind of laugh, because then this was really hard, a couple of these episodes in here, because sometimes there are these great dramas that leave you almost in tears, but sometimes over the years there might be something a little bit lighter in tone that for some reason has more of a favorite appeal, more of a connection. And that brings me to number 43, another Klingon episode, changing in tone drastically again, from Season 3 of Deep Space Nine, The House of Quark. This is one of my favorite comedic episodes of Deep Space Nine. It's such a funny, brilliant exploration of Klingon culture as it meets with Ferengi culture. Quark accidentally kills a drunk Klingon who is the head of a house, and the Klingon house is now teetering on the brink of collapse as the wife, now in charge of the house, kidnaps Quark, and he ends up marrying Grilka very, very shortly and becoming the head of a Klingon house. And it's so fascinating watching the Klingon power play and the politics and the behind-the-scenes runnings of a lot of these powerful houses and how things really work. And a lot of the humor comes from the cultural clashes, as Klingons and Ferengi, I mean, you can't get very, much more different than those two cultures. And Quark actually uses Ferengi means to help save Grilka's house, and they leave on good terms, and it's a fantastic moment for the character of Quark as well throughout, which leads me to number 42 from Season 5 of Deep Space Nine, where Grilka comes back. We have Looking for Parmach in All the Wrong Places. Quark and Grilka are reunited and have a brief wooing and love affair within this episode, but the best part of the plot is Worf becomes infatuated with Grilka, and then you have the conflict of his perspective of her versus the reality, and his total blindness to what is right there in front of him. And things come to a head as Quark comes to Worf for help to try and woo Grilka, because he is still very ignorant of a lot of Klingon culture, and Worf gets frustrated because it's like there's so many comedic episodes from sitcoms and stuff where you'll have that where someone has a earpiece in, and someone else who's better with words is sitting out in a truck with walkie-talkie trying to tell them the right lines. Or it goes back to even some silent movies. You see that with someone standing nearby trying to whisper poetry into the guy's ear, and sometimes you get a down the line moment where they say the wrong thing, and it all ends up being very hysterical. And the best element, though, is when, again, Jadzia's had enough with playing around and trying to get Worf to open his eyes, and just goes right for it, and you finally have Worf and Jadzia get together. Number 41, another comedic episode from the 4th season of Next Generation, Cupid. Another great Q episode. This time he puts the crew of the Enterprise D, our main cast, in a Robin Hood scenario where Captain Picard has to rescue Vash from the episode Captain's Holiday. And this scenario is so perfect for this crew. It works with them more than it would with the Deep Space Nine or Voyager or Enterprise or any other crew. This particular crew in this scenario is perfect. It is such a good fit. It is ripe for hilarious moments, a lot of quotable lines. I remember even around that time getting greeting cards and things with Worf, and I'm not a merry man, and just so many fantastic moments because these characters work so well together, and it's a very fun experience. It's kind of like getting a great holodeck episode without being a holodeck episode, yet somehow even better than most of those. To me, this is one of my favorite and most memorable, just fun and funny Star Trek episodes.